Lee Nam-Yong's policy commentary Long, Diagnosing the Parking Problem in Jongno-gu, Seoul and Exploring Solutions. Urban transportation problems must be diagnosed not by emotion but by data and structural analysis. I define the parking problem of Jongno-gu in Seoul not simply as an issue of daily inconvenience, but as a complex policy issue created by the overlap of urban spatial structure, transportation demand structure, and tourism demand structure. Seoul is a megacity with a population of approximately 9.4 million people, while the Seoul metropolitan area has a population of about 26 million. The number of registered vehicles in Seoul is approximately 3.17 million, which corresponds to about 330 vehicles per 1,000 residents. The daily vehicle traffic volume in Seoul is estimated to be around 11 million trips. Within this structure, Jongno-gu has a resident population of about 150,000, yet the daytime floating population increases to between 900,000 and 1.1 million. I believe that this structural imbalance is the core cause of the parking problem in Jongno-gu. To solve an urban problem, it is first necessary to identify stakeholder groups and analyze the relationships among them. The key stakeholders in the parking issue of Jongno-gu include residents, merchants, tourists, tour bus operators, visitors using private vehicles, and administrative authorities of both Seoul Metropolitan Government and Jongno District. Residents demand sufficient nighttime parking spaces, while merchants require short-term parking spaces to ensure customer accessibility. Tourists and visiting drivers require convenient access to tourist destinations, and tour bus operators require designated stopping and parking spaces for large buses. At the same time, administrative authorities must maintain traffic order and manage the urban landscape. As these stakeholder demands collide within the same limited urban space, structural problems such as illegal roadside parking and traffic congestion emerge throughout Jongno-gu. I argue that these problems must be addressed through a relational analytical framework combined with engineering-based policy analysis. Let us examine the urban spatial structure of Jongno-gu and the limitations of parking space. Jongno-gu is the historical downtown of Seoul. Its total area is approximately 23.9 square kilometers, which accounts for about 3.9% of Seoul's total land area of roughly 605 square kilometers. However, Jongno-gu is subject to strong development restrictions, including cultural heritage protection zones, historical landscape preservation areas, and strict height limitations. Major national heritage sites such as Gyeongbokgung Palace, Changdeokgung Palace, and Jongmyo Shrine occupy significant portions of the district. As a result, land use flexibility is extremely limited. This structure reduces the physical capacity for urban spatial utilization. Across Seoul, the total number of parking spaces is estimated at approximately 4.6 million. However, a large portion of these spaces are attached parking facilities for commercial and office buildings. The share of public parking facilities available for residents remains relatively limited. In Jongno-gu, the official parking supply ratio is reported to be around 86% based on administrative statistics. However, when actual perceived demand is considered, some areas are estimated to have an effective parking supply ratio below 70%. In the northwestern areas of Jongno, many residential streets are less than 4 meters wide. These narrow road conditions make even two-way vehicle passing difficult. Within such spatial constraints, roadside parking inevitably generates both traffic congestion and safety problems. I believe that any policy design must take these structural spatial constraints into serious consideration. Next, we must examine the inflow structure of vehicles into Jongno as a tourism city. Jongno-gu is one of the most important tourism destinations in South Korea. Gyeongbokgung Palace alone attracts approximately 6 million visitors annually. When visitors to Bukchon Hanok village and Insadong are included, the total number of tourists visiting Jongno is estimated to exceed 20 million per year. Surveys show that foreign tourists visiting Seoul most frequently travel to the Jongno area. Such tourism demand significantly increases the inflow of vehicles into the district. The demand for tour buses in central Seoul is estimated to be between 3,000 and 4,000 buses per day. However, the number of available parking spaces for large buses within Jongno-gu is only in the hundreds. This severe shortage leads to roadside stopping and illegal parking by tour buses. In particular, long-term bus parking frequently occurs along roads near Gyeongbokgung and Gwanghwamun. In addition, the number of tourists using private cars continues to increase. According to Seoul Metropolitan Government data, more than 30% of visitors to Seoul travel using private vehicles or rental cars. As these vehicles concentrate in the historic downtown area of Yongno, parking demand continues to rise. I believe that any parking policy that ignores this tourism demand structure cannot be realistic. Dedicated public parking space for tour buses is absolutely necessary. I strongly argue that separate public parking facilities must be constructed specifically for tour buses and visitor vehicles. The spatial scale of a tour bus is fundamentally different from that of a passenger car. A single tour bus occupies the equivalent space of approximately 3 to 4 passenger cars. Therefore, a shortage of large bus parking spaces dramatically increases traffic congestion. Major global tourism cities have already solved this problem. Paris has secured more than 1,300 dedicated parking spaces for tour buses, while Kyoto operates over 800 dedicated tour bus parking spaces. Such policies play a critical role in maintaining stable traffic order in historic city centers. Jongno-gu must also systematically establish dedicated public parking facilities for tour buses near Gwanghwamun, Gyeongbokgung, Bukchon, and Insadong. If tour buses are guided to designated parking facilities, illegal roadside parking will be significantly reduced. At the same time, tourist mobility can be shifted toward pedestrian movement and shuttle transportation systems. Such policies will simultaneously improve the urban landscape and the tourism environment. Let us examine the relationship between residents' parking problems and building regulations. The parking problem for Jongno residents is an even more serious daily life issue than tourist parking. Among the approximately 150,000 residents of Jongno-gu, more than 30% are estimated to own vehicles. This implies that more than 40,000 resident vehicles exist within the district. However, residential parking spaces are severely insufficient. In particular, alley parking problems are extremely serious in the northwestern neighborhoods such as Pyeongchangdong, Bwamdong, Hongjidong, and Muakdong. These areas are characterized by steep terrain and narrow road structures, making the installation of parking facilities very difficult. As a result, residents often have to travel long distances at night in order to secure parking spaces. The fundamental cause of this problem lies in building regulations. Jongno-gu is subject to overlapping restrictions, including cultural heritage protection zones and height limitations. These regulations make it difficult to construct underground parking facilities or to remodel buildings in ways that expand parking capacity. I therefore argue that building regulations must be significantly relaxed in order to solve the parking problems faced by Yongno residents. Expanding parking capacity through regulatory reform is urgently needed. I believe that building regulations should be strategically relaxed in order to address the parking crisis in Jongno-gu. In particular, underground parking facilities should be actively permitted when constructing new housing or renovating existing buildings. In addition, floor area ratio incentives should be introduced for developments that include parking facilities. Such policies can encourage residents and private developers to voluntarily expand parking capacity. In Tokyo, Japan, a vehicle owner must prove the availability of a parking space before registering a car. This system plays a crucial role in maintaining overall urban parking order. Japan also operates systematic parking facility standards for buildings. Jongno-gu should adopt similar policies. Regulations that restrict underground parking construction should be relaxed, and hybrid parking strategies combining public and private parking facilities should be promoted. I believe that such policies represent the key strategy for improving the living environment of Jongno residents. A comprehensive policy approach based on FEA is required. Parking problems cannot be solved through a single policy instrument. I argue that an integrated administrative approach based on the Federal Enterprise Architecture framework is necessary. Transportation policy, tourism policy, urban planning policy, and smart city policy must operate simultaneously. Such integrated policy approaches maximize policy effectiveness. Data-driven policy is particularly important. Traffic data, tourism data, and commercial district data must be integrated and analyzed in order to design effective parking policies. The introduction of smart parking management systems can significantly increase parking space utilization efficiency. Global city case studies show that smart parking systems reduce parking search time by more than 30% and reduce traffic congestion by about 15%. Jongno-gu is the historic and cultural center of South Korea and a major tourism hub. Therefore, its parking policies must also be designed at a global standard. I believe that through scientific data analysis and engineering-based policy design, the parking problem in Jongno-gu can be effectively resolved. The suffocating parking problem must be solved in order to strengthen urban competitiveness. The solution to Jongno's parking problem is clear. Dedicated public parking facilities for tour buses and visitor vehicles must be systematically constructed. Building regulations must be significantly relaxed in order to secure sufficient parking space for Jongno residents. Smart parking management systems must be introduced to maximize parking space efficiency. These policies are not merely transportation policies, but urban competitiveness policies. Cities with stable traffic order become more attractive destinations for tourists. At the same time, the quality of life for residents improves significantly. Jongno-gu is the historic heart of South Korea and a globally recognized tourism destination. I believe that Jongno must implement world-class urban transportation policies. I define the parking problem of Jongno-gu as a critical urban policy challenge that must be resolved. Through systematic data analysis, global policy benchmarking, and scientific administrative frameworks, Jongno-gu can become a model for urban transportation policy in Seoul. This is the direction of the Jongno-type urban policy that I propose. Thank you for watching Lee Nam-Yong's policy commentary, long